welcome everybody. I am Mary Hunt here at WATER, and I would like to welcome you on behalf of WATER, each and every one of you, this very special occasion to celebrate our dear friend and relative to some of you, Patricia Horsley. So I say good evening to those in the US and good day to those in Australia. And I am here with Diann L, who's the other co-director here at WATER, and Wed Naji, who's our intern this year, born, living in Germany now most of her life, and born in Yemen. And Wed, we don't see you at the moment, but we will. And she is our IT person tonight. So we're here in the WATER office. As you can see, it's quite a homey place where Patricia was quite at home. And since today, at least in the US, yesterday in Australia, would have been Patricia's 95th birthday, I think our coming together is a fitting way to remember her. So I welcome all of you to this celebration of our friend and our colleague, Patricia, or Tricia, or Trish, as many of you called her, whose love and generous spirit brings us together across the miles. Let me encourage you to mute your phone, mute your audio, except for the speakers, so that we get a good, clear line for this. We are recording, and we'll certainly make it available to all of you. I want to be clear, this is neither a funeral nor a memorial. Both of those have been done beautifully in Australia. Rather, it's a celebration of the enormous goodness that Patricia generated. It is as if she rewrote a classic line of scripture to read, "Go and make friends in all nations." Go and make friends in all nations. Not disciples, but friends. So this gathering is a chance to meet friends and to think about how we can generate even more such goodness at a challenging time in today's history. I must admit that a part of me, and just a part of me, is so glad that Patricia didn't live to see how the US government is behaving. Her love and expectations of this country deserve better. I welcome you with particular delight, and those who are part of Patricia's family are of special notice tonight. Susan Burns Bauer, who's been so helpful to us, Patricia's brother Ian, her sister Mary's widower Harding. We know all of you from stories of the land, of the country, and we know this hour together gives you a sense, or at least we hope it does, of how highly regarded and beloved Patricia was in WATER circles. You know, sometimes when you know somebody in your family, you don't have a sense of how they're perceived in the world. But she was instrumental in connecting WATER with WATAC and others, and she kept us deeply informed about political and ecclesial life in Australia. So Harding, those conversations I'm sure you've had with Patricia. Let me say a word about WATER for those who don't know us. WATER is a small nonprofit or a non-governmental organization in the Washington, D.C. area. We are in that dreaded place called Inside the Beltway. Diann L and I co-founded WATER in 1983, so we have more than 40 years of experience of bringing feminist studies in religion and the fruits of feminist spirituality to the work of social change. Let me say that again. We bring feminist studies in religion and the fruits of feminist spirituality to the work of social change. We offer programs for education, time for meditation, liturgy and ritual. We collaborate with other progressive people to bring about a more just and equitable society. While started by two women with Catholic roots, the Alliance now includes men and non-binary people, folks from many religious backgrounds and no religious background whatsoever. Alliance members live in many countries, including but not limited to Ecuador, Chile, Germany, Switzerland, the Philippines, not to mention Australia and New Zealand. With Zoom, our global connections are more important than ever, and we use them. Let me simply outline today's program, and then I'll turn it over to my colleague, Tracy McEwan. Tracy will make opening remarks on behalf of WATAC, and I will follow that with images of Patricia. We've gathered a few pictures that I think you'll enjoy. Then we'll have remarks from Kathleen McPhillips, sociologist of religion, who will sketch some of Patricia's biography. And then I will talk a little bit about Patricia's connections here at WATER. And then we'll really get into the heart of it, having small group time to chat, not only about Patricia, but about how we seek to emulate her good example, never pretending to imitate her unique style, of course, as we go about the work of religiously informed social justice. After about 15 minutes in the groups, we'll regather to hear some of the highlights and just have open conversation. We'll close with a brief ritual, hopefully at the top of the hour, with Diann L leading us. That will conclude our formal time together, but the Zoom will remain open for conversation as long as people wish. So let me turn then to my friend and colleague, Tracy McEwan. Tracy has a doctorate in theology from the University of Newcastle and works on issues related to sexual abuse. She will offer a welcome. Go ahead, Tracy. Great to see you.
Thanks so much, Mary, and it's just so special to be here today for me. I didn't know Patricia, but I have some of her books. Susan was very generously able to pass them on to me for WATAC, and eventually they'll be in a library. But for the moment, they're sitting on my bookshelf. And sometimes I get little messages from Patricia as I open a book, and out fall her notes and various newspaper cuttings that she gathered over the time. So whereas I didn't ever meet her in person, I sometimes feel like I know her through these little gems of wisdom that she passes to me. So I'd like to begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the unceded land on which Patricia lived and the land on which I work and live, which is the Darawal country. And I invite you to use the chat to acknowledge the land on that you're on today. So I just wanted to acknowledge, and celebrate the culture and language, and acknowledging the ongoing connection of Aboriginal peoples in Australia to land, sea, and community. And I pay respect to elders past and present, and to all First Nations people, including anyone who is here today. So I did being WATAC, so I'll let those in the US and some of those from Australia who don't know about WATAC. WATAC stands for Women and the Australian Church, and WATAC was beginning in Australia around the same time WATA was in the mid 1980s. And Patricia was part of the organisation of WATAC from the very early days. When Patricia Madigan, who's here today, interviewed her for a history of WATAC, she said that she was there in the mid 1980s, right in the beginning of the organisation. So WATAC is a grassroots organisation that aims to kind of celebrate women and allow them to be the church that they want to be. So there's gatherings, and we've got a conference on later on this year for if anyone in Australia or the US wants to come and attend. You can find out more about us at the website, which Andrea, you're there, you might put our webpage in the chat. So Patricia was there from the very early days, and when I asked people about, what they remembered about Patricia, one of the things that they said was that when she talked to you, it was like you were the only person in the world. She gave you her complete attention, and you always felt valued and respected. And I think that's a lovely way to be remembered. But I'm going to tell you one rather humorous tale. But I'm hoping I'm getting this right for people who are actually there. But in 2002, WATAC held a conference in Canberra in Australia. And as many of you know who are working with grassroots and not-for-profit organisations, money was always a challenge for WATAC. And the keynote speaker for the conference was Miriam Therese Winter, who some of you would know from her writings, and you might have heard her speak before. And the conversation in the room turned to fundraising and how WATAC might raise funds. And Patricia stood up and said that she had an idea that the next cow born on her beloved land would be called Miriam, and all its offspring, the funds from the sale of the male offspring that would be called Michael, I don't know where Michael came from, would be sold for profit, and the girls would be kept for future breeding. And that Patricia's venture raised a significant sum of money and was able to sustain WATAC's work for many years to come. So I had a bit of a giggle, like when I heard about Miriam the cow, And I think that kind of creative energy and wisdom is another thing that Patricia's remembered for. So I'm going to pass back to Mary, I think now. Is that right, Mary? And
That's right. Thank you.
we'll move along. I think there's a picture of Miriam the cow in the slides.
Upcoming immediately. Only to say, Tracy, I thank you so much, and thank you for WATAC's tremendous work over the decades. And all I would say is that one of the things I was reading from Patricia, she commented that the name really was erroneous. It should have been "Women Are the Australian Church," not "Women and the Australian Church." And I thought that was just emblematic of her attitude toward these things, which I very much share. So thank you so much. And we will begin now with just a few images of Patricia to give us some of the flavor of her life. And again, thank you to Susan and to others who've sent us these pictures. We've just selected a few so that people who didn't know Patricia, some of our, especially water people who didn't know Patricia, will just be getting to know her through the pictures. So everyone enjoy. Just a very quick run through. Thanks so much. Just a quick look at her for those especially who didn't know her. And now I welcome and Miriam. I wonder if Miriam Treese Winter ever knew about Miriam. I wonder if anybody knows that. I'm sure she would be delighted. Um, and now I welcome my friend and colleague Kath McPhillips, who holds a doctorate in sociology from the University of Newcastle and works on gender justice in religious institutions. Kath will share some of Patricia's biography, and I have to say, Kath, what a life it's been.
Absolutely, Mary. Absolutely. Thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm speaking to you today from the lands of the Awabakal people, north of Sydney, and I pay my deep respects to the leaders of this beautiful life-enriching country for caring so well for its lands and its waters, and I am the beneficiary of their care, and for that I am deeply appreciative. So Trish was without doubt a woman of her time. She was born in 1930 to a well-known and well-off family and benefited from good schooling and university. In her life, she made great use of these opportunities. Her family lived in Sydney, but also had farmlands in the southwest of New South Wales, and she grew up with a great love for this land and a deep understanding of the power of belonging to it. The unfolding of modernity in 20th century Australia provided expanded opportunities for young women, and they were ones she did not squander. She attended a girls' convent school in Sydney, King Koppel, Rose Bay, run by the Sacred Heart Sisters, and she maintained a lifelong love of the sisters and the school, contributing to many restoration projects and the alumni community, which she gave of her time and leadership to. She never lost her strong Catholic faith, although the patriarchal culture of Catholicism would, in her later years, draw her to the women's reform movements in and around the Christian churches, particularly in Sydney, where she was a member of WATAC from the 1980s. Trish supported the feminist reform projects, including the ordination of Catholic women, something which at the time was considered quite radical. She read ferociously, and her library, which Tracy was talking about, attests to her great interest in feminist theology and church analysis. She donated many of her books to WATAC, and I remember visiting her apartment after she had died and feeling like I'd fallen back in time to the great debates and analysis of the feminist Christian movement of the 80s and 90s. Trish attended Sydney University and studied architecture, where she met many other young women and men who'd lived through and who many had participated in World War II. At Sancta Sophia College for Women, she met my mother, Prudence McLaughlin, who was studying medicine. The two women became lifelong friends, bolstered by the marriage of Trish's older sister, Mary, to Prue's cousin, Harding Burns, also a doctor, and Harding is here with us today. Prue, who was slightly older than Trish, had a different upbringing to Patricia, which, while middle class, was hampered by the fact that her father, my grandfather, did not believe in the education of girls, and she was forced to leave school at 16 for secretarial school. After working in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force unit during World War II, she was given the opportunity to study at university by the federal government, which she pounced upon and promptly enrolled in medicine. I remember as a child and later as a young woman pondering my mother's women's friends who all met at Sancta Sophia College and really appreciating the new opportunities that the upheaval of the World War had brought to their lives. Many years later, in the mid-1980s, and independently of each other, Trish and Prue joined WATAC and rekindled their friendship. They could see how the Catholic Church and other faith traditions were holding women back and pressing them into stereotyped versions of Christianized womanhood. They wanted change, and they were prepared to stand up for it. Patricia, who didn't marry or have children, had a freedom born from living in a time of great social change and personal privilege, and she fully engaged that. She travelled widely, often to places that were risky and unusual, such as Mao's China, and she particularly loved South America, which in the middle to late decades of the 20th century were a ferment, political disruption and revolution. Patricia's nephew, Nicholas Burns, tells of how she was caught up in a political protest in the streets of Buenos Aires during the dictatorship of Perón, and rather than being terrified, had been uplifted and excited to witness the class struggles for justice. She was at the central places of social action long before many of us. I remember as a young academic beginning my membership of the American Academy of Religion in the mid-1990s and attending my first conference in Boston. I remember feeling slightly isolated and concerned that so few Australian women were attending and participating in what felt like a very powerful opportunity for learning and networking with women scholars in religion from all over the world. Of course, I ran into Patricia early on as she was attending the water meetings held at the beginning of every AAR conference. And I was surprised when Mary and Diann casually mentioned that Trish was a great friend and would be joining them for Thanksgiving at their place in Washington after the conference. I saw then that Trish really was quite remarkable. She had the capacity to relate to many people in many places on different levels, and she had a deep commitment to the education of women everywhere. She understood the politics of feminism and gender inequality, and she was not afraid to speak her mind and see the reality of the damage of gender inequality. She was one of the women who led the way for us younger feminists and scholars, and in that sense, we stand on the shoulders of this generation. Although I didn't know Trish well, she has always been someone that I've held affection for in her connection to my mother Prue and the amazing women of this post-war generation. Her commitment to fighting gender inequality in the churches was so important. I'm grateful for her insight, her individuality and independence, her deep intelligence, and her courage to live a different life and pass on her wisdom to her large and loving family and the women she came to know in the feminist space. These women strode forth, built networks, questioned power, and then handed on their knowledge and wisdom to the next generations with confidence and love. Long may she be remembered as a woman of courage, faith, and strength.
Thanks, Kath. That's such a lovely remembrance of not only Patricia, but also of your own dear and powerful mother. Thank you so very much for that. As you mentioned, Nicholas, I was reading through some of the materials and I remembered her nephew talking about the fact that when he would go there for tea, she would dig into the freezer for frozen cakes, bringing out morsels that could hardly be identified. But it was Patricia who never wasted a crumb. And likewise, as I was reading through the correspondence, I noted that her choice of stationery was always creative. You know, you would have thought who she was, she would have been writing on, you know, fine silk or something, but it was old aerograms and lined notebook pages. And she was reusing and recycling before it was fashionable. So you're absolutely right, Kath. She was ahead of all of us. Let me turn then to my own remarks about her relationship to us in the US and her global friendship. Those of us at Water, she certainly had other US friends before she met us, but just let me make some remarks about that that I think will help to fill out the picture. How Water became engaged with Patricia. Diann New and I went to Australia in January of 1993, where I lectured at the Australian Council of Churches event entitled Living Under the Southern Cross. As part of that conference, I remember an Indigenous man spoke about his challenging life. When he finished, Patricia rose and told of a relative of hers being rescued from a flood on his land by an Indigenous person. She expressed her desire to be supportive of Indigenous people and asked how she could be helpful. The speaker, the man, replied that she could be friends, she could make friends with Indigenous people, which I'm sure she did. Since I had lectured on the topic of friendship, it was a memorable, touching exchange that reinforced my sense that we were all very much on the same page somehow. Not long after that, Patricia came to the US, where we reconnected at a Call to Action meeting in Chicago. Call to Action is a group of progressive Catholics discussing church issues. Patricia had planned to visit friends in Washington, D.C., so I invited her to stop by Water. Of course she did. And she felt a certain kinship, a sisterhood, if you will, with Water people, Water ideas and commitments. The rest is the story of friendship, Patricia's and mine, and by extension, the friendship of WATAC colleagues and Water folks, and so many others. Patricia was here a few times. She was a great fan of the environmental pioneer Rachel Carson, who was born here in Silver Spring. So that meant a visit to her birthplace. She also admired Helen Keller and her teacher, Annie Sullivan, who were buried in the Washington National Cathedral. So we explored the crypt church there. In her travels, she always paid her respects at Religious of the Sacred Heart schools. So we made that pilgrimage here in town. And Patricia enjoyed visiting Louise Dunn in Connecticut, the daughter of the famed muralist artist Hildreth Mier. Louise's mother had taken her daughter to Australia and enrolled her in the convent school in Rose Bay for a bit, when Louise and Patricia were girls, and Mary, I'm sure, was there as well. All those many years later, they were still friends. Patricia loved music, so we heard a concert at the Strathmore Music Center. She adored trains, so we poked around the old regional train station down the street from Water, from which she traveled to visit yet another friend in West Virginia. But mostly she just liked to come to the Water office for tea in the afternoon and chat about feminist work and religion and about our lives. One memorable 4th of July here, she arrived for a party, sporting an American flag-covered apron with 2 large pockets. She told us that she was the mother kangaroo from Australia with her joeys, except hers were bottles of nice Australian red. I also recall her at an election night party. I don't know how she was here, but it was in November. I can't put a year on it. Again, she fit right in with US friends, happy to share our reality, our progressive politics, and tell us about hers. My calendar is replete with the notation, call Patricia, as we had the habit of talking regularly. Patricia was progressive in most ways but technology, preferring the old-fashioned phone call. often 2 hours at a time, late into the night for me, an early to bed person, and rarely before noon for Patricia. We covered the waterfront, literally. It was our custom, because she had no email, to send her an envelope. Remember the postal service? Most months we sent them with programs and writings. Other mere mortals got these via email, but she never warmed to the internet. So we sent things to Patricia by post. We had the Patricia Horsley file. Everyone knew where it was and what you put in it. We always joked that she had the best archive of water, as it was rumored that she never threw anything out. Remember the cake. Her comments about and her critiques of our work were invariably spot on, always encouraging, and everlastingly supportive. Patricia was generous beyond measure with her resources, but more important with her love, her care, and her kindness. She was generative in the full sense of the word, literally producing justice, reproducing goodness, generating laughter, and regenerating goodwill in her own unique way. I consider it an honor to call her my dear friend, and I'm happy to be accompanied by others and her family tonight. Now it's time for all of us to share, to take a few minutes in conversation, to talk not only about Patricia and how we knew her, but also to think together about how we can continue this legacy of generative love. That's how I think of her, as a generative and loving person. It's generative love. Very different perhaps from what she was expected to produce, as it were, but how rich and fruitful she was in her production of friendship, of care, and of justice. So with WED's technological brilliance, we will move into small groups, have an opportunity for conversation. Now, there'll be 3 or 4 people in your small group. So please take the time to introduce yourselves to one another and to share your name, where you're from, something about your connection to Patricia if you have one. And then let's think together in these small groups about how we can continue this legacy of generative love. And then in 15 minutes, we'll come back together and have an opportunity for some plenary conversation that Tracy and I will lead. And then we'll conclude with our very short ritual at the end. So please enjoy your small groups and have fun with friends and family of Patricia Horsley. Thanks, Wed. Welcome back, everybody. If your group was like mine, you didn't want it to end. Tracy, I thought you and I might just kind of moderate this section together and invite people. Did you have lovely conversations?
I did. I was extremely fortunate because I was in a room with some of the family, and Elizabeth, who actually went to school with Mary at the Sacred Heart. So like that was, I feel really privileged to have been in the room with Harding and Ian and Elizabeth, who knew Patricia so well.
Wonderful. I'm going to invite people to just, if you'd like to make a comment, down at the bottom of the screen, there's a function called chat, and you can simply, called react, right next to chat. And you can simply raise your hand using that little button, as I have just done. And now I'm going to lower my hand. And if you'd like to speak, this would be an opportunity to do that. And if you would raise your hand, then we will call upon people in the order that we see them. And if the chat button is not to your liking, you can always do this. Remember this, we just wave to somebody, I want to talk. Or in Catholic schools, we used to pound our chests and say, stir, stir, like sister. But it was stir, stir, because we didn't want to waste the time. We immediately had to give our answer. So there's always the old stir, stir approach. So the floor is open. I see Peggy Thompson has her hand up. And let's see if we can go back and forth so that we don't have all the people from one country speaking first, but just the floor is open and everybody is welcome. Peggy, you're first.
Thank you. Mine's very quick. I was in a group where nobody had ever met Trish. And so we decided that we would talk about people who had inspired generative love in our own experience. And that was the way that we sort of carried on her legacy.
That sounds really great. Did you have an example, Peggy?
Well, I actually didn't get to share mine. So maybe one of the other two people.
Go ahead, Peggy, it's your big opportunity.
Okay, well, I was gonna mention Margaret Traxler, who some of you know, who was very active in Catholic feminist circles in the United States. She was a school sister of Notre Dame, and she was my godmother, and was very active in the women's church movement. And Margaret was one of the most committed feminists and outspoken women that I've ever known. But she was also a woman of great gentleness and firmness at the same time. And she always would remind me, and a woman of great prayerfulness. And whenever things would get particularly stressful, she would just say to me, Peg, and she was also Peggy, she would say, Peg, don't ever forget what's really, really important. Don't let the anger overwhelm you. And that was a great gift, and I still remember it. So that would have been my example, but we heard some beautiful examples in our group.
Thanks so much, Peggy. Andrea, you've got your hand raised.
Thanks, Tracy. I only met Patricia very briefly, but the family might appreciate the fact that I grew up in Adelong, which is very close to the area that Patricia loved so much. And I had the fortunate experience of being in a group with Mary Jane. We chatted ourselves about how to be generative, and I guess how easy it is really to just give time to encourage others. And Mary Jane shared a wonderful story of someone in her extended family that she's offering that real gift of support as this woman undertakes some very important academic and inspirational work. And I'm conscious of how, particularly for my nieces, how significant it's been for them to have someone who is really on their side. And I guess when you're not a parent, at times you are free to be a more wholehearted supporter. And what a difference it makes in young people's lives to have someone who really gives them the time and listens to what's going on for them and just really has that attitude of really wanting to bring them to fullness of life.
Thanks so much. And we'll turn to Elizabeth Lee next.
Thank you. I had the privilege of being with Patricia's niece, Susan, and I'd never known Patricia, although it was a name, her name I was familiar with. And what Susan continued to reinforce was the friendship and the connection of Patricia with so many people, and how she was drawn to a deep relationship, and connecting that with the story of that Mary told about the Indigenous person at the conference saying to Patricia, go and befriend an Indigenous person. And to me, that is a great invitation for all of us, particularly in these lands we now call Australia, to have those relationships with the First Peoples of this land, relationships that are so generative. And for me, it would, if there were more of those relationships, there may be the voice referendum that dismally failed in this nation may have had a different outcome, in the same way that the plebiscite we had about marriage equality was successful. And one of the factors for that may be the fact that most people knew someone who was from the LGBTI community and therefore was able to say yes, whereas a nation we said no to the First Peoples.
Thanks so much, Liz, for that. Harding and Janet?
I'd just like to note that our families, the Horsleys, and my family, the Burns and McPhillips and co, we all arrived here in the colony, mostly from the United Kingdom, Ireland, and so on, in the 1840s, as people mostly in the lower socio-economic and relatively uneducated classes. And it's amazing now, thinking about the life that Patricia and Mary and Ian and all of us have had, and that we've been able to travel the world and work in the world. I think it says a great deal for the spirit of energy and invention, which must have been moving in Australia in those early times in the 19th century and in the later 19th century. And Tricia certainly demonstrated that.
Thank you so much, Harding. Janet, did you want to make a remark as well, or?
No, I didn't have anything really further to say.
Okay.
No, it's been lovely being here and you know, wonderful memories of Trish, and yes, it's been a very special morning.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that. I know we all are. It's been for me as well. And just so happy to have, especially Harding and Ian and yourself and Susan, to be here as from the family. Just means so much to all of us. Let's continue. Who would be next? And remember,
Elizabeth, I was just going to say, Elizabeth, Ian, did you want to say something? Was that a wave or?
Ian, you'll have to just unmute yourself, and please feel free.
Right down the bottom
There you go. There you go.
How's that?
Perfect.
Yeah, great.
Welcome.
No, I just wanted to thank and compliment Mary and Kath and Diann on the wonderful background knowledge of Patricia's marvellous work and your obvious love and affection for her. It's just been a privilege to be part of the Zoom meeting, as I know the other members of the family feel. It's very difficult where you're the youngest one left, and I miss my 3 siblings very much. But that's the way life turns out. But I just repeat, it's been wonderful to be part of this, and thank you all very much. I'm sure the wonderful work will be continued. Thanks so much,
Ian.
Thank you, Ian.
I was just thinking of imitations of immortality with this gathering, and how and I didn't know Trish, but I'm moved and I feel the power of her generativity, and I feel blessed to have been involved in this discussion. And I've been also moved to plan a little course for my community for next fall on having a good death. I know that there's no guarantees about that, but I think that in a death-denying culture, the people from Water who imagined this occasion were filled with grace. And if we can calmly and prayerfully and gratefully make moves towards planning our own and sharing that, I think it would make the culture healthier. And I'm grateful to Trish for motivating this one.
Rosemary, thank you so much. And for those who don't know, Rosemary Ganley is a Canadian in Peterborough, and she has a weekly column in the local paper, which she then anthologizes into volumes that you can get. She's a marvelous writer, and she's 88 and active as can be. Diann and I will have the privilege of going to visit her. We're going to see Peterborough through the eyes of Rosemary Ganley next month for a few days. And for Americans to go to Canada is to breathe fresh air. So that's going to be great fun. We'll also see Peggy Thompson on the way in Syracuse. So anyway, we have some good fun ahead of us. But it's just those kinds of connections that make this work and this kind of community gathering so wonderful. Sue, we'd move on to you then.
Thank you, Mary. I just wanted to pick up on some comments that Trish Madigan made in our group about the importance of coming together in conferences and what a powerful impact in the 80s and 90s bringing speakers like Joan Chittister and other leaders like Miriam out to Australia, what an impact that made on people's lives, and particularly on women in churches. I know my own mother came across from Perth and was, which was unheard of for a mum of 4 kids to go off to a conference back in the day. Trish was saying how powerful it was in terms of theological formation as well for her as a religious sister, and just how, while she hadn't been part of the meetings or the regular WATAC activities, the draw card of the conferences was something that she made sure not to miss. And Trish spoke beautifully about the conferences and about the conversation that she had with Patricia Horsley, who was then ill and at the end of her life. So to let you all know that Trish left a bequest to WATAC, which we are dedicating to an event that will be held in a rotating city around Australia each year. We're starting in November with our conference in Sydney, and the Patricia Horsley bequest will be celebrated with a lecture by Julia Baird, who is a fabulous role model to emulate Patricia's critical view of the church and her generative way of offering different ways to access grace through the everyday life to get you through the critical times. And that lecture will be an event. While we love Zoom and we love connecting on Zoom, it'll be an event that you have to be there. It'll be an in real life thing, and it will travel around the States so that everybody in Australia will make sure that they get some exposure to the legacy and the inspiration of this wonderful women. And I think there will be lots of merchandising opportunities, hearing about cows and about country and about spirit and about the gifts of Patricia Horsley. There'll be lots of ways that we can continue to celebrate beyond the theological, but the ways that she brought people together gleefully. So on behalf of all of the WATAC team that's putting the conference together, to Patricia's family, we are profoundly grateful for the legacy that she's handed on to us to make use of it. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue. I think we might have time for one more person, Tracy, do you think?
Yeah, maybe. I was, there's Susan's put her hand up, so good timing, Susan.
Spot on.
Susan, you're on mute, sorry.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah, that's better, thanks.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I just want to echo what Dad and Janet and Ian have said, that it is a privilege to be with all of you this morning. I've not met Mary in person, or Diann, or I've met you, Tracy, briefly, and Kath, obviously. And although I feel that I know Mary because we exchange emails and commentary on topics of the day, as I imagine Mary and Trish would have done many times. And it was a pleasure to meet Elizabeth in our small group chat, and just to reiterate that it's wonderful for us who knew Trish, obviously, and and loved her, and in her unique, she was a unique person, but it is wonderful to understand more broadly through all of you wonderful, articulate people, how Trish was seen in other spheres, and the magnitude of her presence in those other spheres. So that's been a privilege. So thank you very much. That's all I can say on behalf of the family. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Susan. And I think, you know, that's probably a good time to be going to the ritual, Mary.
Exactly. Susan, thank you. And to all of you, the Zoom will be open after we finish the very brief ritual. If people want to make additional comments or chat with somebody excitedly about something, that will be an opportunity to do it. But just so that we respect each other's schedules and have the opportunity to get on with our days or our evenings here, I turn the floor over to Diann New, who is the other co-director here at WATER, a liturgist and therapist, and she will close us with a moment of reflection. Diann?
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. Let's bring back those incredible photos of Patricia. We've told stories of her. Let's just see her again as we enter into this closing time and ritual. So, Wed. Trish was a unique and virtuous woman who lived a wise and fulfilling life among us and throughout the world. Think of the photos of Patricia and the stories of her as we listen to excerpts from wisdom literature in the book of Proverbs. These practical guides on living a meaningful life give us clues about how to live equally meaningful lives. Wisdom has built her house. She has prepared her food, decanted her wine, and set her table. She calls to all of us in the city and the countryside, come, eat my bread and drink the wine which I have prepared for you. Wisdom calls out in the streets, I will pour out my heart to you. Tune your ear to wisdom and take her truth in your heart. Then you will understand who divine wisdom Sophia is and discover love of life. You will understand justice and the ways of happiness and generative love. Wisdom is clothed with strength and dignity, and she laughs at the days to come. Many are the women of proven worth, but you excel them all. We honor her for all that her hands have done. Let our works bring her praise to the city gates. We each have our own special memories of Patricia, Trish, or Trisha, as she was known to most. Take a moment to think of one memory. Oh, I know you have many, but think of one that's asking for some space right now. And feel her special presence with you for this moment. We'll just take a pause for a little bit. Say thank you to Tricia, Patricia, Trisha. And you can come back to this memory and many others at many times. Some of us in the Catholic tradition have something called the Communion of Saints. We can connect with those who've gone before us. You can too. So we'll remember Trish and carry on her legacy. When we create and cherish global friendships, we carry on her legacy. When we treasure the land around us and advocate for climate change, we carry on her legacy. When we work for Catholic women's equality and justice, we carry on her legacy. When we collaborate through WATAC and WATER, we carry on her legacy. When we support feminist work in church and society around the world, we carry on her legacy. When we see a need and use our resources to make a difference, we carry on her legacy. Let's go forth today, tonight, remembering Trish as we carry on her legacy. Let's love as she loved and be generative. Let's carry on her legacy of advocacy, philanthropy, and global friendship. And let's smile, open our eyes and ears, and make a difference in the world, as Trish did. So long as we shall live, Trish too shall live. For she's a part of us as we remember her and carry on her legacy. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you all. Amen. Blessed be. Let it be so.
Thank you, Diann. Appreciate your closing our event with this reflective time. I want to thank everybody who participated, and a special thanks, of course, to the Horsley family for being part of this gathering and seeing some of Patricia's friends from other parts of the world. I want to thank our colleagues at WATAC, and especially Tracy and Kath for real partnership in making this happen. And I want to express my own special thanks to Patricia, whom I know we all miss very much. I know I do. So a good day to those of you in Oz, and a peaceful evening to those in other places where it is now nighttime. It's been a pleasure to be together. Thank you so very much. And feel free to stay on and continue the conversation on the Zoom.